Alright, so, hello everyone. It's been a long time since I've made any kind of video, but call me inspired because last night I got to see the late night showing of the Last Jedi, Star Wars Episode 8. I got to see it. I've had all day to stew over and kind of like reflect on my thoughts and everything. Because my initial reaction during the movie and while I was in the theater and when I left the theater was very disappointing. Now, let me preface this. I am one of those fans that has avoided any and all fan theories regarding Snoke or Rey or any of the other characters that are in there. Also, I avoided trailers, previews, any type of conjecture about what was going to be in this movie, what this story was going to be about. I wanted to go in there with an empty and an open mind so that Disney could tell me the story that they wanted to tell me. I had a lot of problems with episode 7. A lot of problems with episode 7. I'm one of those fans that greatly dislikes how much it is a carbon copy of episode 4, and unfortunately this movie is much the same in that way. Uh, I found myself in the middle of the movie kind of going like, oh, this is from Empire Strikes Back, or oh, that's from Return of the Jedi. Um, there's a lot of stuff in there that felt like it was from Return of the Jedi. So, if in case this wasn't obvious, this is a spoilers video, so I'm going to get into a couple of things in a little bit more detail. The number one thing I want to start with is right where the movie starts with, and I'm going to answer something by posing a question. What exactly was the point of Luke Skywalker in this movie? Why did you need to physically drag Mark Hamill out of retirement, bring him into this movie in order to use him the way that you did? I felt like he was completely underused. I did not see a reason why he was relevant basically at all to the plot of the story. Unlike most other Unlike basically every other Star Wars movie, the older, wiser mentor has something to teach. In this particular movie, Mark Hamill's character, Luke Skywalker, of course, does the exact opposite. He is depressed, he is cynical about everything, he's waiting to die, he doesn't want anything to do with Rey, the Resistance, anything, which is completely out of character for Luke Skywalker. Think about it. Think about it. Okay, so he failed with creating his own Jedi Order, and his nephew managed to murder all of his students, and he feels guilty about that. Okay, I get it. But hey, your sister is fighting against the First Order, and her life is in jeopardy, and we need your help, and he's going to stand there and say, no? Tough luck? That's not Luke Skywalker. I don't understand why they needed to use him in this film. The only thing that he really provided for the film, aside from the, I guess you could say it was cool bit at the end where he does the force projection from completely across the galaxy and forces Kylo Ren to fight an image of himself. I guess that was cool. Begrudgingly, I will say that was cool. It didn't make any freaking sense at all, but I guess it was cool. Um, but the only other thing that he provided was that he gave voice to the moral ambiguity of the values of the Jedi. And this was something that has been hotly debated since even before I was born, I think. What exactly are the morals and principles of the Jedi, and how do you really justify them? Luke Skywalker brings to mind a lot of these questions, a lot of the vagueness of the balance of the Force, how there always must be light and darkness, and he says the whole thing about it's not important. You know, the Force exists whether the Jedi are here or not, whether the Sith are here or not. So I'm just going to be retreatist about everything and take my hands off of the whole thing. Again, you could have done that exact same thing without actually having Luke Skywalker in the movie. The fact that they chose to tell the story that way and completely neglect their main character and their best actor, by the way. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say that Mark Hamill was the best actor in the whole movie by a pretty significant margin, in my opinion. But you chose to use him in that way. I was greatly disappointed. That's a personal thing that bothers me. You took the main character of Star Wars and you made him a trivial, almost, support role. I'm not happy with that. Point number 2. This movie recycles a lot. It recycles a lot. Very similar to The Force Awakens. This movie felt very predictable as I was watching it because it felt like it was just this point is from Return of the Jedi, this point is from Empire Strikes Back, and nothing kind of explains this better than the confrontation with Supreme Leader Snoke. Now, I have a lot of issues with this scene in particular, but let me start with this. This scene, and if you guys have not seen this movie yet and you're watching spoilers videos for some reason before you go see the movie, I don't know why you would do this, but this scene was basically taken exactly out of Return of the Jedi, almost part for part. Rey arrives willingly, with admittedly with a little bit more style than Luke did, but she arrives willingly aboard Snoke's ship to allow Kylo Ren to capture her, to bring her before Supreme Leader Snoke in handcuffs, by the way. Brings him towards Supreme Leader Snoke. Snoke removes the bindings, takes her lightsaber, puts it on the same handrest that the Emperor did in Return of the Jedi, and then proceeds to monologue about how powerful he is or how awesome of a villain he is. Meanwhile, he's showing her how her rebel slash resistance fleet is being destroyed right out of her window, and that if she would just turn to the dark side, it was literally the same exact thing as the throne room scene in Return of the Jedi. The only difference is that Rey and Kylo Ren are not actually fighting each other at that moment, but that's part of the problem I have with it. The reason that the throne room scene in Return of the Jedi is so powerful is because you have built this relationship between Luke and Darth Vader from the beginning of Empire Strikes Back all the way through until that moment. It's a culmination event that has a lot of emotional attachment. To both characters. Luke has said that he wants to try and rescue his father from the dark side, so he's going to confront him in front of the evil Emperor and try and rescue him there. And the entire time when you're first watching this movie, you don't know if Darth Vader is actually redeemable. It's never said explicitly in the entire movie. I mean, we all know he is now, but we had no idea that Darth Vader actually still was going to save Luke. So while they're fighting and where everything else is going on, Luke's life is seriously in jeopardy. Not so in this movie. Not so in this movie. There is no feeling of emotion in that scene. First of all, Snoke himself has almost no introduction, and you know nothing about his character other than, oh, he's powerful and he's evil. You can't use more than two adjectives at a time to describe this guy. Nothing like the political intrigue figure that Palpatine turned out to be. If Disney's actually going to do, I really hope that Disney explores who Snoke is, where he came from, in a later film, because as of right now, his death and departure from this whole storyline is completely unexplained and provides literally nothing to the story. Snoke himself seems like a placeholder effect in order to bring back the corruption and redemption arc that we've seen already in 2 different trilogies. You saw it with Anakin Skywalker and Palpatine. You saw it again with Anakin Skywalker, Luke Skywalker, and Palpatine in the original trilogy. So Supreme Leader Snoke, he seems like a placeholder character. You honestly, why does he exist at all? Why are you going to introduce a character just for this purpose? You could have easily, or a brand new character, I should say. You could have easily done the extended universe cloned Emperor storyline, and it would have made just as much sense. Point number 3, the pacing and the side plots. I've been watching some reviews, and honestly, this was the part that I thought was kind of forgivable almost, but this is the part that everyone is really ragging on if they didn't like this movie, is that the subplots in this movie don't feel like they contribute anything to the general plot. I think because the general plot is almost a carbon copy of Return of the Jedi, that these distractions to me were almost refreshing, because they were distracting me for a moment that this movie was basically something I'd already seen before. Unfortunately, though, they couldn't even distract me well enough because it was so absurdly done. And we're talking absurd from a guy who thinks that Jar Jar Binks is a redeemable character. I don't mind Jar Jar Binks in hindsight, but this was like completely ridiculous. So let's go back a second to what the main purpose, what the main conflict is going on here. There's no planets in jeopardy. There is no like actual war or battles going on. The entire conflict of the galaxy has been reduced to about a dozen, maybe like 8 or 9 First Order Star Destroyers chasing 3 rebel ships. 3 rebel ships, and we're not talking about chasing them from planets to planets, like all over the entire galaxy. No, they're about like a couple hundred miles from each other, and the Empire is just, or the First Order, excuse me, is just shooting lasers at them, and they're just hitting shields because they can't go to light speed because they'll track them and they'll run out of fuel. So the entire conflict is literally just this. That's where a huge number of characters are for the entire movie. Leia, Poe Dameron, Admiral Akbar, who gets no fucking justice in this movie, and all these other main characters are literally just trapped on one boat, shooting distance from a bunch of Star Destroyers that are just chasing them. That's the primary conflict. That's the urgency. We have to save the Resistance because they're going to get tracked through light speed. There's no asteroid fields. There's nothing to break up the absurdity of this. So then you take from this, the plan is that we are going to get on board Snoke's capital ship, disable the thing that allows them to track them through hyperspace, so that they can go through hyperspace, because presumably, even though they have no fuel left by the time they're able to do that. The hyperspace, like, you would think that you'd need fuel to enter lightspeed. I don't know. But, so we have to go find this supreme codebreaker that, the one lady, I can see, this is my problem with the series. None of these characters stick with me. The Mons, or whatever her name is, from the Force Awakens cantina, she just knows a guy. That's literally what this plot is. She knows a guy that can break through the security so that they can disable, or they can get on board the Snoke capital ship. Because for some reason he's the only person that could sneak on board the ship. So they have to go to this. Basically, it looks exactly like Pirates of the Caribbean's Tortuga. I think they actually took like the same CGI and then just reworked it, because it looks exactly like Tortuga from Pirates of the Caribbean. They go to this like Tortuga-like city, which is just it's like a resort for a bunch of like alien like criminals and whatever. And it's a casino inside, and the absurdity of this casino is something that has been noticed by basically everyone that's seen this movie. Honestly, I feel like they chose a casino just for the 3D effect. Just so you can see the coins and the dice and everything else like that. And they spend so much time on just being like, oh, look at this casino. Like, look how cool. This isn't world building, guys. This is just a setting. This just looks like they went to Las Vegas on vacation to go find this code breaker. And of course, they get captured immediately because, you know, it's why, like, you can't have things too easily. So they get captured. They meet up with Benicio del Toro. Again, another character, another actor that is criminally underutilized in this movie. They find him. He turns out to be like the person that's going to save the day. But he's morally ambiguous. He's kind of a scoundrel or everything else like that. But hey, it's Star Wars. Star Wars gave us Lando Calrissian and Han Solo. We think this might be okay. So they managed to break out in the most absurd way possible. Somebody online was describing the creatures that ended up trampling through the casino as Harry Potter-like, which I can't agree more with. It's a very accurate description. So they break out of this thing. They manage to hijack a shuttle from somewhere, and they make it all the way back just in time to get on board the ship. And of course, guess who betrays them? Benicio del Toro's character. But not to worry, because they get captured by Captain Phasma. Captain Phasma starts going through this whole like diatribe about how awesome she is, and then again, I could not escape just how unoriginal this movie was. Who saves the day? They're being pinned down. 2 main characters being pinned down in the middle of this, in this case, a hangar bay instead of the 4th floor of Endor. They're being pinned down, ready to be executed, and all of a sudden a rogue ATST walker saves the day. No Chewbacca this time, though. You can't have it be completely, like, ripped off. Instead, it's BB-8, because somehow BB-8 went unnoticed and was able to get inside of an ATST in the middle of an occupied hangar. See, that's the thing. Every time in these two movies where they take something directly out, like pluck it identically out of the original trilogy, they do it poorly. Chewbacca's takeover of the ATST in Return of the Jedi was awesome because it took place in the middle of an ongoing battle. He was able to get on board with primitive technology because he's a Wookiee, he knows how to work this thing, and he turns the tide of an already existing battle. These guys are captured on board a ship. They're captured because the droid... I'm sorry. But the droid recognizes that BB-8 is not what he appears to be. But somehow, after the two characters get captured, BB-8 escapes to take over an ATST walker to start this whole two people in an ATST versus like seemingly 100 stormtroopers on board so that Finn can have his cool one-on-one with Captain Phasma. There's so much Deus Ex Machina, so much just weird tangential plot points that are just there to set up like kind of pretty action sequences, but none of it really is tied together in a way that makes sense from a storytelling perspective. So, they get off the ship, they make it down to the rebel base that's on this new planet, which, actually looks a lot like Hoth because it's all white. I know it's a sand dune with red stuff that comes up underneath it. But then, okay, the Empire then lands all of these AT-AT walkers to advance on this thing that literally just has, and I swear to God, it's the same profile as the Battle of Hoth. It's 2 blaster towers and a ditch with guys with, like, laser or blaster rifles sticking out of it as the Empire advances forward. But it can't be 100% original, guy. You can't be 100% ripped off, you guys. There has to be something different about it. Okay, they've got a gigantic battering ram laser, which doesn't actually serve any real purpose because they don't really need it. It's okay. They take the same exact scene, but it can't be exactly the same scene. So instead, they mix it up with one little thing, just so it's like, oh look, guys, it's not the same. It's not the exact same scene that you saw before. No, it is. It really, really is. You can't fool me just because you put the rebel base behind a big door and you bring a battering ram with you. Like, that doesn't change the fact that this is exactly the same scene that I've seen already before. And then during that, again, I have a problem with the whole resistance versus first order thing because it's basically about 24 resistance fighters versus like 25 AT-AT walkers or something. Like, the odds are just absurd. Like, the balance of power is so absurd. Then you've got TIE fighters coming in. So who comes to save the day? Chewie and the Millennium Falcon. Okay, so it's all the First Order's TIE fighters against the Millennium Falcon, and they all break off their attack on the ground forces to chase the Millennium Falcon. Finn even says something that kind of recognizes in a fourth wall way the absurdity of this whole thing. They really hate that ship. Yeah, because all Chewie did was do one little flyby, and now all of the TIE fighters, all of the air support is now following it. And then the TIE fighters proceed to chase the Millennium Falcon, and they spend about like 2.5 minutes on this chase sequence, where literally it looks like the exact same chase sequence as Return of the Jedi's Death Star run. You even see the lights, like the lights of the Millennium Falcon in the front, the way that it turns. It's almost identical. The only difference is that this time it's in a bunch of red caves instead of, the superstructure of a space station. And then the ending is just, well, the ending's the ending. At this point, like, I was already so, like, I was so numb to how the story had gotten to where it was. They had managed to put the resistance fighters in such an impossible win scenario that you thought, oh, something has to happen. How did they get out of this? Like, where are the Knights of Rohan right now when you need them? They were even calling for reinforcements from the Outer Rim or something. You thought, like, the whole time you're sitting there going like, okay, I know this looks bad, but how does the Resistance get out of this? And so the way that they chose to do it was that Luke Skywalker channels a mirror image from who knows how far away across the galaxy, which is convincing enough that Kylo Ren comes down and does a one-on-one sword fight in front of the rebel base with this mirror image, and that gives the guys enough time to slip out the back door and get inside the Millennium Falcon. And just on that note, again, going back to how pointless Luke Skywalker actually is in this movie, Rey already knows how to use her Force powers. I think I'm the only Star Wars fan in this entire like galaxy that has a problem with the fact that Rey just instinctively knows how to use her powers. Like she knows how to pull. Like she was able to pull the lightsaber towards her. She was able to resist Kylo Ren's like mind alteration. She was able to just channel the Jedi mind trick, which is apparently really difficult to do if you pay attention to the prequel lore. Um, so why? What purpose does Luke Skywalker have in teaching her about the Force? Which he doesn't, by the way. He gives her 3 lessons, and one of the lessons is just the Force is in balance. He doesn't do anything to teach her anything. He just kind of sits there and sulks, and she figures everything out for herself. And the point that proves that is the Force is more about moving rocks, more than moving rocks, is what Luke said. So then this is where we've come to, guys. The words of the sage Luke Skywalker resonates through Rey's brain, and she says, "The Force is more than moving rocks." And what does she proceed to do? She moves rocks. I I really really wanted to like this movie more than The Force Awakens. Um, I gave The Force Awakens a begrudging pass when I saw it. Actually, that was no, that's the whole thing too. Like, despite the fact that I I knew that what I was watching felt familiar, I left The Force Awakens feeling good about the movie. It wasn't until later when I sat on it that I realized I had all these problems with it, specifically with Starkiller Base. I still think that Starkiller Base is the worst idea that's ever been in the Star Wars universe. Until I saw Princess Leia's Superman flight. You guys thought Jar Jar Binks was bad. The Starkiller Base and Superman Leia outdo Jar Jar Binks in terms of pure ridiculousness any day of the week. That's just my opinion. Um, I wanted to give this movie a chance to redeem many of the things that I thought was wrong with The Force Awakens, and instead of redeeming itself, it just makes me more. It makes me less optimistic about Episode 9 because the the writing in these movies, what's original in them, feels very weak. The new characters, I don't really care about any of the new characters. Honestly, like the most interesting character to me in this movie that was introduced was the Vice Admiral, and that's because she's played by the same actress as Dr. Salinger from Jurassic Park. Like that was literally the reason why I was interested in her character. It's like, oh, it's Dr. Salinger with purple hair. Like that's kind of cool. They kill off Admiral Akbar off screen. You don't see him. He says one line in the whole movie. Luke Skywalker has a completely diminished role. Han Solo is already gone at this point. Leia spends most of the movie comatose. They don't do the old characters any real justice. And of the new characters, the only one that I think has any real identity is Poe Dameron. Finn just he's almost like the guy that needs to be rescued all the time, even though he's trying to do all the rescuing. Like I don't get it. Like I don't understand like the point of his character. He's just there to complain basically. Rey feels very bland. She feels very bland in much the same way that Luke Skywalker did in the first one because she's supposed to be the protagonist that you're identifying with. I get that. However, she doesn't have any of the weaknesses that Luke Skywalker had. She has no weaknesses. She's like she flies ships, she speaks Wookiee, she speaks droid, she knows how to just instinctively use a lightsaber, and she's super freaking powerful. Like I don't like that was the whole thing that made Luke an endearing character in the hero story of A New Hope is that he's just a guy from nowhere who doesn't know what he's doing and only at the very end because he trusts his feelings he's able to do the impossible. But Rey, it's so much it's so over the top with Rey. She has no weaknesses. She's as powerful as Luke Skywalker was in Return of the Jedi, and there's no explanation for it. And in this whole thing, a lot of fans were holding on to, okay, well maybe she's from like a super like, powerful bloodline, and then the plot twist, which I'm glad that they did this actually, because I think Star Wars has way too much familial like importance already with all the movies, and Rogue One only complicated that. She turns out to be a nobody. Her parents aren't important to the storyline, and as much as I applaud that, applaud Disney, like you finally broke the cycle of everything needs to be about fathers and mothers in Star Wars. Now I'm still asking the question, okay, well then if she's a nobody, where do her powers come from? They just keep mentioning this awakens. They don't say anything else about it. And guys, I'm a Star Wars fan that likes the prequels. I love Clone Wars. Give me something here. Like I liked the good and evil deity figures in the Clone Wars episodes. I give me something to explain why this character is so powerful, even though she's so young and completely untrained. Give me something. Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, is almost point for point Anakin Skywalker. Just Anakin Skywalker that's more evil. It's Anakin Skywalker without him being like someone you're supposed to cheer for at the beginning. He has all of the same emo qualities. He fills basically the same role. He's someone that's supposed to be rescued. Although, are they still trying to rescue him at the end of this movie? I think they're still going to try and do the redemption storyline in Episode 9. But just the new characters just don't hold up, and the old ones, I feel, just weren't utilized correctly, or were just underutilized and underappreciated. And this whole movie, like, I left it, I'm just like, okay, the score is amazing, the visuals are incredible. It is a treat to sit there in a theater and watch these battles with the technology we have to bring them to life these days. Of particular note was the throne room battle with the Imperial Guards. That was done beautifully. The cinematography is great. The sound is great. The camera work is great. There's not as much obnoxious J.J. Abrams lens flare in this one. All of the production things are great, but the more important part, the story, the characters, all of that is not. And this time, Disney, I gave you a pass with The Force Awakens. I didn't, even though it was basically just a retelling of Episode 4. I can't tolerate this one. This one hurts because you're continuing to change the storyline for you. But honestly, at this point, I'm asking you, like, if you were going to just change everything to tell a brand new Star Wars story, why did you even bring back the old characters? Why? I think I know why, because you wouldn't have been able to sell it if it didn't have the original cast in it. And so now you're slowly phasing them out of the importance of the storyline, but the way that you're doing it is so disappointing, because the story that's being told around it just doesn't hold up. And right now, I think that this trilogy, when it's completed, if it stays at this rate, unless Episode 9 is the best Star Wars movie, hands down, that has existed, I think this is not as good as the prequel trilogy, because at least the prequel trilogy told an original story. If nothing else, the prequel trilogy told an original story. This one doesn't. It's a rehash, and it's not even a well-done rehash. So, Star Wars is really disappointing, or The Last Jedi was really disappointing. Doesn't mean that I'm not still a fan, it's just and I'm not even saying that Disney is doomed, in my opinion. No, Rogue One and Star Wars Rebels have proven that Disney still has some good things it can do with the franchise. But this new trilogy that they're telling, this new story that they're telling, right now, I'm not a fan. And I can totally just pretend, later on in life, I can totally just pretend that these movies don't count. And right now, that's where I'm at with my fandom. So, to my friends and anybody out there on the internet that watch the entirety of this video that care about what I have to say, thank you. It's been a while since I've made one. I'll take it. See ya.